Stay tuned for Truckers Life Radio, coming up next on tncradio.live.
It's Landline Now, followed by Steve Summers' Overnight Drive every night on tncradio.live starting at 11 p.m. Eastern and 10 p.m. Central.
Hey, y'all, this is Curtis Grimes, and I want to give a shout out and a special thank you to everyone associated with tncradio.live.
Hello and welcome to tncradio.live. This is Truckers Life Radio. And now here's your host, Ron Frazier.
Good evening and welcome to Truckers Life Radio. I am your host, Derek Thompson, filling in for Ron Frazier. If you're joining us for the first time tonight, Truckers Life Radio is a program dedicated to helping drivers on life's highway. And we are so excited that you're joining us this evening for today's program. If you want to reach out to us, we really look forward to connecting with our audience. And if you've got questions or if you have a story or want to bring something to our attention, we would love to hear from you. And you can email us at truckerslife@tncradio.live. That's truckerslife@tncradio.live. I'm excited about our guest today and the conversation we're going to be having. We are joined right now with Tom Wolfe. Tom, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Derek. Good to be back. And I am the Tom Wolfe who is not the governor of Pennsylvania.
That is an important distinction. Thank you. Yeah, this would be a different conversation, Tom.
There you go.
Now, Tom, you do have a really interesting professional background because you really started off as a professional truck driver. And how many years did you do that again?
21 years.
21 years, yes. So quite, a long time. And now you are a professional counselor. Is that correct?
Yes, that's also true.
Now, most people wouldn't make the connection there between driving and counseling, although I think there's actually a pretty strong connection there. Maybe, being on the road, you were your first patient as a counselor. But how did that transition happen? I'm interested to know.
Well, I actually never wanted to be either one of those things.
Right.
But my wife and I had an experience when we were about 24 with was a God experience kind of thing. And it really impacted both of us. And I felt a call on my life to go into ministry at that point. Yep. I had no real way to do that. And I needed to make some kind of living for our family. So it opened up, and all of these are separate long stories that we don't have time for, but all pretty miraculous in how it unfolded. Ended up with me going on the road with a Christian company out of Northeast Philadelphia that remanufactured automotive parts. And so I was out there for 21 years wondering what happened to the ministry. Like, how was I supposed to ever get there, Uh-huh. However, in all of 21 years was listening to Christian radio and preachers and all these guys. That was kind of my seminary experience in the end.
Yeah.
And one day I was just prayed for 21 years. I said, God, just call me into the ministry or call me out of this trucking thing with as much clarity as you called me into it. And right. So 21 years later, I answered a phone call on Route 29 between Charlottesville and Lynchburg from my local church, calling and inviting me to be the youth pastor at 47 years old. So,
I forgot that part of it. Yeah, there was a transition in youth ministry.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow, that's fascinating.
There, yeah. Which, and so I got into youth ministry. I finished a degree in Bible and started a dual master's in counseling and master's of divinity. And that was short-lived because it was just too much, and I quit everything for about a year, just doing the youth ministry. And then I really desired to go back and finish something. And at that point, with a Bible degree, I felt better about where I was theologically than I felt with little girls and razor blades. And I thought, I got to finish the counseling thing. This is a different world now. And so I went and finished the counseling degree, eventually leaving ministry altogether in the church setting, and went into ministry with Priority One Foundation, which is a ministry outreach to men. So it's been a very kind of crazy career. And I went back actually about 5 years ago to driving again with a local farmer. So I ended up with 25 years of driving, all told, a little over 2 million miles. And yeah, that's
amazing.
Crazy story.
I love, yeah, absolutely. I love that God trained you for ministry through your truck driving experience, and I think he was doing that. There was, as you said, even just being able to listen to radio programs, but I'm sure a lot of different things that led to equipping you for the ministry and the profession that you're in now. Tell me real quick a little bit about the counseling. So you said Priority One, and it's counseling primarily men. Do you also counsel couples, or is it and women, or is it really just men?
Men or marriages.
Yep.
Early on in the counseling, I just started to really get a lot of guys coming in from the church setting who had, secret issues with usually pornography and things like that. I'm so excited to see that Transport for Christ is reaching out into that community to kind of fill these needs for guys. But it really became all of a huge focus on sexual sin, and that was something I had my own experience and story with. So I had a real heart for that, because guys are just stuck in churches all over, and in and out of churches, because it's just such a kind of a shame-based behavior, if you will, and guys feel locked down and stuck, and they can't volunteer this to anybody, without feeling like everything will be lost, and so it's really been it's keeping me busy full time now. Basically, I work at a big church 2 days a week up in Lancaster County, and I get all those cases. So there's a huge need. We certainly need more counselors in that area, but I feel like I am doing exactly what God called me to do at this point. I'm living into the fullness of his purpose and calling on my life. And so I just try and stay in my lane, as it will. But I just got a client the other day that's a full-time truck driver. So it's like all things are circling back to, I prayed for a long time, God, where do all of these things that I've done, where do they all kind of come together?
Yeah, intersect, and right.
To be reunited with Transport for Christ has been a huge blessing, because we were very attached to them early in the 80s. We had the, Jesus is Lord, Transport for Christ, mud flaps on our trucks and all those kind of things, which was really cool. Helped hold us accountable as to how we drove.
Right. Yeah.
You don't want the guy in the car to say, the last thing I remember seeing was this Jesus is Lord thing,
Right.
Right before I got run over.
Right, exactly, right. Or as he was flipping me the bird.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. Hey, that is really amazing, Tom. And we're going to be taking a break here in a minute, but I do want to, if you could just briefly answer how some of the challenges you experience as a truck driver, and especially when it pertains to mental health and marriage and healthy relationships. What were some of the things that you were experiencing as a truck driver that you're now dealing with as a counselor, and you have kind of a first-hand experience with?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a big question.
Yeah.
there was a lot of, I thought we'd be on the road for a couple of years, and a couple turned into 5 and 10, and we have 4 children. So probably the biggest thing for me was dealing with not being there for my family, or feeling like I wasn't. We were home every weekend, but I felt like I missed a lot of important things. And we changed the dates on the birthdays and this and that. We had a rich family life, but boy, when something would happen and I wouldn't be home, that would be the most difficult time. And of course, now that just the drivers, I noticed as I was driving recently, how much is changed on the highways. Distracted driving is just enormous. And the whole trucking industry has changed. There's no paper logbooks anymore. And so the stress on today's driver, I think, is greater than it was when I was up there, frankly.
Yeah, absolutely. And we are going to be getting into that, which is a really important conversation, just what the driver's going through today, the stress level. But yeah, I think that, God obviously has you right where you need to be, Tom, in the counseling ministry, and then having opportunity or your experience with others is really, really powerful. We need to take a quick commercial break here, but when we come back, we're going to pick up this conversation with Tom, and we will see you in just a few minutes.
Hi, I'm Dr. Christopher Cortman, and now for the Mental Health Minute. Can people really change? I mean, should you even bother getting into therapy? It's expensive and time-consuming. And for what? Can you really change? Years ago, I had a graduate school professor who said, people don't change unless it's too painful not to. Is that true? Well, in my experience, not all the time, but it's pretty good. Because change is often motivated by pain, by some kind of discomfort, by something that hurts deeply, something that frustrates us, and therefore motivates us to take on a challenge to change something. So what can we change? Not other people. Oftentimes not circumstances, not the weather. What we can change is our perception of things. We can change our behavior and our responses to people and situations. And we can also learn how to let go of painful things from our past. Those are things that therapy can really help you change.
Be sure to listen to Building Strong Minds with Dr. Chris, Mondays at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central, right here on tncradio.live. I'm Shelley Johnson with Kathy Tuccaro. You can hear us Tuesdays on tncradio.live at 8 p.m. Eastern on Women Road Warriors. And don't miss Steve Summers' Overnight Drive right here on tncradio.live, weeknights midnight to 5 a.m. Eastern. Brought to you by Hot Shot Secret.
tncradio.live, your commercial driver navigation station.
Welcome back to Truckers Life Radio with Ron Fraser, right here on tncradio.live.
Welcome back to Truckers Life Radio. I'm your host, Derek Thompson, and we're having a conversation with Tom Wolfe. Tom, in the last segment, we were talking a little bit about your professional background and the interesting path God had you on, from 21 years driving to a brief stint in youth ministry and now counseling. And we ended kind of talking about the stressors that just kind of are a part of the professional driver's life. And I think it's so powerful that you mentioned one of the stressors for you was the absence of being home, and that just really, was a challenge. We hear the term being stressed out quite often, and we know that stress is a part of life. I wonder, though, for the professional driver, if they really understand the way that stress is working in their life. And could you speak to, what does it mean to, or what are the side effects of stress, or markers that identify that someone is having too much stress?
An increased sense of anxiety. You always feel like you're tense and you're not really sure why. Kind of low-grade headaches, increased anger, feelings of sadness, hopelessness. All of these things come from increased stress, and the driving job has a lot of stress just built into it. You've got delivery deadlines to meet.
Yep.
You've now got these electronic logbooks. You've got electronic monitoring. If you stab your brakes hard because somebody just pulled over in front of you, somebody at your company knows that just happened. And it's like, right. I don't know how many people have jobs that are that scrutinized.
Right.
And I didn't experience that. But I hear about it and I'm like, wow, I just don't think I even want to drive in this environment with that. And on top of that, you have breakdowns unexpectedly, you have traffic jams, you have accidents that delay you, and all of these things are beyond your control. Yep. And on top of that, you live in this kind of crazy environment of COVID now for over 2 years. And no matter how much or how little you think that's affected you, it's affected all of us. And to some extent or another, and all of these factors play against us to just decrease our emotional margin. So then the next thing is like the last straw, and we find ourselves in this over-the-top anger situation, or, not so much road rage anymore because you can't get away with that. Somebody's reading your mail as it happens.
Yep.
But there's just a lot going on the road in this culture that few people really know anything about. There's a whole subculture out there called over-the-road trucking. Yep. And, if you don't get it, you just don't get it. But these drivers are out there dealing with a lot of things that other people don't have to deal with. I mean, other people have their own stressors, but the driving job is craziness because you have all these people out there. You're trying to do your job. You're trying to be responsible. And you have all these people out there messing with you where you work. It's like,
right, exactly. Yeah. It makes me think, like, I don't know if there's a stress index. And there should be if there isn't one. And if there was a stress index, what I'm hearing from you, Tom, and it's so true. And I don't think a lot of people really understand this or take the time. And maybe even some drivers don't even realize this. But if there was a stress index, truck drivers would score really high on that index as far as things that create stress in a person's life. And one of the things that I didn't even think of that you just mentioned is the over scrutiny, on, we all see as a pedestrian driver, we see the signs, how is my driving? That even behind the truck, even that is a form of accountability and almost this like policing, that people are watching your every move, and anyone can call in with a complaint, and how this just builds up stress, kind of baked into the career is these stressors. So this obviously impacts us. It impacts our mental behavior health, our work performance, our relationships at home. Knowing that, what are some, there's healthy and unhealthy ways for us to deal with stress in our life. And I wonder if we could talk first about the unhealthy ways. What happens when we're taking on a lot of stress? What are some unhealthy ways that people try to mitigate that in their life?
Well, addictive behaviors of every kind, whether they be pornography or gambling or, overeating.
Overeating, yes.
There's there's just, you're out there by yourself, and it's difficult. There's little accountability out there in your downtime. There are, especially like places, certain states that have legalized gambling. There's little casinos attached to the truck stops, and there's everything available out there to take your money, your time, and your soul, to be honest with you. So it requires a great amount of vigilance to just, do the right thing, watch your diet, try and get some exercise. Try doing that in the truck stop. That's a little weird, right? So you're putting on your running shorts in the truck stop and running around.
Yeah. You're doing jumping jacks in the parking lot.
So the things that we need to do to mitigate stress is hard to do in this trucking industry. So, rest, exercise, eating well, having friends, having a community of friends. So having to deal with everything on your own out there is not the best way. I mean, we were hardwired for connection, and that's hard to do in that industry. That's a lot of drivers, men and women, have pets with them, and the pet is a great stress reliever to just sit there at the end of the day with your friend. And it's been scientifically proven that just petting your dog is a huge stress reliever. Having to take your dog out to go to the bathroom at 2 a.m. is a huge
stressor. or if it goes to the bathroom in your cab. Right. No, that's so important. I think some of these behaviors that we know are a part of the truck life, some of these unhealthy behaviors, the gambling, overeating, pornography, all of that, it's interesting when we see that not as a character flaw or defect in a person's life. I mean, it could be that, but more likely than not, it is someone who has experienced a lot of stress and is trying to find a way to mitigate that stress in their life, and oftentimes doing that in a way that's only creating more stress, only compounding that. And once we become aware of that, though, I love, Tom, what you're talking about is finding ways within the challenges of the work environment to do that. Having a pet, exercising, even though that's challenging, some healthy eating, healthy exercise. What are some, those might be all that you can think of, but are there other ways, if you had a driver right now call and say, I really am stressed out and it's getting to a breaking point, what would you share with them right now over the phone on other ways they can kind of help mitigate that stress?
Well, these days there are a lot of meditation apps that you can download on your phone. I'm a big fan of one by an author, one of my favorite authors named John Eldredge, and he has what's called the 1 Minute Pause app. And, you can pretty much take that 1 minute just about wherever you are to just recenter, refocus. I'm a big fan of deep breathing exercises. I like to call it 6-7-8 breathing, where you inhale for a 6 count, you hold it for a 7 count, you exhale for an 8 count, and to be very intentional about the ending of that exhale, to slow that down. And that activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which really mitigates against stress and anxiety. So some very simple things like that can really lower your stress level in a matter of minutes. And you can do it anywhere.
Yeah, that's so important. The ability to do some of these things that might not seem like they're, the biggest things, but they work. Something just as far as breathing exercises, meditation. We can do that anywhere, and it's helpful. That's great. Well, Tom, we got to take a quick break. when we come back, I'm really interested. There's something related to stress buildup in our life, but I think it actually gets overlooked quite often. And what we're going to be talking about when we come back from the break is the issue of secondary trauma and how that also kind of creates stressors in our life and can impact our mental health in ways that we're probably not fully aware of. So we will get to that when we come back from this break.
You're listening to Truckers Life Radio on tncradio.live.
Hey, rideshare drivers and gig economy workers, the host of tncradio.live, the Rideshare Rodeo podcast, and the Gig Economy podcast come together for news, talk, music, stories, laughs, and more. We're live Fridays at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central, right here on tncradio.live.
Trucking Moves America Forward, or TMAF, is boosting the image of the industry by telling the story of trucking, and your story can be part of it. Upload a photo, tell us what you love about trucking, or send us a story about a good deed or charitable act in trucking. Be sure to follow us on social media and contact us through truckingmovesamerica.com. That's truckingmovesamerica.com.
Welcome to Truckers Life Radio. I am Derek Thompson and having a conversation with Tom Wolfe. Tom, when we went to break, I mentioned this idea of secondary trauma. And I do think it's something that is overlooked in the truck driving profession. At least, in my experience now being involved at TFC Global, it's not really being talked about. And yet, when I talk to drivers and the conversations I've had with people who've been in the industry for a long time, things I'm hearing are, a part of the industry is seeing a lot of traumatic events. And so, you've got a secondary trauma is not experiencing that traumatic event yourself, but seeing someone else go through it. So an example is, seeing a car accident where someone gets seriously injured or dies. That is a traumatic event for the person who witnessed that, secondary trauma. I wonder if you could talk to the prevalence of that when you were a driver and how that might be a part of the industry that we need to pay attention to.
Sure. Yeah, that is, that's a big thing today. I think probably much larger issue than it was back when I was driving. I've now been off the road as long as I was on the road, except for my 4-year stint driving locally. And I can remember from 20 plus years ago, accidents vividly. And you would just replay them over and over and over after having witnessed it. And, some really, really close calls myself that, just could have turned out so horribly. And yeah, you have to deal with your own trauma at that point, realizing this has really affected me. You might not be able to sleep that night. You can't stop replaying the events that you saw. And it was pretty crazy when I thought about and these pictures like literally come back from 20 plus years ago. So it's a real thing. Back then it was kind of, the solution or the response to that was, suck it up, buttercup, and do your job,
Right. Yeah, exactly. Bury it.
This wasn't a big conversation back then, but now it's become huge due to social media and 24-hour news, I would say, that we now, we didn't have cell phones when I started. We didn't have, it's a wonder anybody could do anything because we didn't have a phone, but we relied on each other and a lot of other things that involved more connection with human beings. But now, and the news was delivered to our house 3 times a day on TV for about a half hour or whatever it was. And now we have 24/7 news has become a business. And now we have all of the trauma of the world delivered to us every hour.
Yep.
Nonstop.
Yeah.
And we just take it in because it's what we think is normal, but we have no idea of the cost of that on our soul. We were not designed to take in all of that trauma.
That's right. You know, and that's such an important point, Tom. Secondary trauma, we don't even just have to physically see it happen in real time. It also, through social media, through the news, we are, whether we know it or not, consuming a lot of traumatic events, stories. Now, even, think about the news coming out of Ukraine and all of this, the human suffering. And what you said in the beginning really resonated with me, Tom. Like you can recall accidents that happened 20 years ago because trauma kind of like stays lodged in our bodies.
Yeah.
It doesn't just come and go. The thing that makes it a traumatic event, and one of the symptoms of that, is that it stays with us, right?
Right.
And we're replaying it in our mind, or when we think about it, it's almost like too, if you experience a traumatic event, and it may be 10, 15 years goes by, but then you recall the event, you have the same emotion, the same response that you had when you first experienced it.
Yeah.
It can create that same kind of thing. And that helps you kind of know that, oh, all right, I've got some trauma living within me that hasn't been resolved yet. So,
yeah. I mean, this has been a wide, like a big breakthrough of this kind of information in the recent years, largely through the book, The Body Keeps the Score, which is all about how our body does hold trauma. And, in my counseling, I'm dealing with guys that are sexually addicted almost all day. And there's always a trauma piece. And we have to go after that. So all day, I'm listening to other people's trauma. And so I have to mitigate against secondary trauma every day as part of my job. So, we learn how to not own that. We have to listen to it. We have to empathize with the client, but we can't take all that home with us. It's too much on top of everything else. So I really don't watch the 24/7 news stuff any longer. I get my news in small dosages. I do prayer and I do meditation before and after my job to release that stuff and make sure that I'm in a good place going in and I'm in a good place by the time I get home. And I don't think the average truck driver really thinks they incur that much trauma in a week or in a month or even a year,
right.
But they do.
Yes.
And that's, if we're not aware of that, we will take that trauma and deliver it to somebody else.
Yep, that's right. It's almost like a good analogy there is the buildup in an engine. If you're running out of oil, your oil's getting dirty, it kind of just builds up. You don't know you have a problem until you explode, till you can fully break down. And secondary trauma, I think this is why it's so overlooked, is because we don't know we're taking it on and that it's impacting us, because we just don't automatically think, oh, that was a traumatic event, or until it's too late oftentimes. So, and this has obviously been prevalent in your practice. So again, kind of going back to what you would share to a driver with the buildup of stress, what are some ways to, that people can, understand that they've are dealing with some trauma, and what are some good steps for them to take to mitigate that in a healthy way?
Well, the thing is, don't store it. If you've seen a traumatic event, you need to share that with somebody. You need to, process that with somebody. Now, the the methodology of going to, like, the Las Vegas shooting. They got the first responder, the counseling or psychological first responders now will go into an arena like that and immediately try to get people to begin to download their story. Where were you? What did you see? What were you feeling? All of these kinds of things, because we need to separate those events from the emotions that we begin to attach to them. So it's processing with somebody, whether you go into the truck stop, you sit down, you talk to another driver and you go, oh my gosh, this is, what I experienced today, or calling home or calling a pastor or a counselor or a close friend and processing that trauma. Day to day, it's the same kind of stuff we talked about, practicing the deep breathing and the relaxation, eating well, taking care of yourself, like limit your intake of social media and of news. And I know it's so easy to just do that because we're out there and we have very little else to do except to listen to something while we're putting in all these hours of driving. Be very careful that what you're putting in isn't exacerbating the stress and the trauma.
Yes.
Choose things carefully, limit your news, limit the social media. Never, through social media, never have we been more connected and more disconnected at the same time.
That's right. Yep.
We now have, 11,000 friends, and our depression, anxiety, and suicidal tendencies have never been higher.
Yep.
But nobody's going to force us to do that. You have to decide, I'm not going to live with all that stress. It's not good for me. I'm going to end up having stress-related diseases and illnesses, and it's just not worth it. It's all preventable, except for you come upon an accident or something. Those things are not preventable. But in those times, you need to have the emotional margin to be okay at the end of that day.
Yeah, I love the idea you shared there too of connecting with somebody, having someone you can share these things with and process out loud. That is so important. And that gets back to what you shared earlier, is the driving experience can be an isolating one, but it doesn't have to be. And you mentioned pastors or a good friend or your spouse, somebody to call and process things out when you're seeing something. The opposite of processing it out loud with someone, of course, is again just to bury it, to keep it to yourself, to experience it, but not share that with somebody else. And I think that's so important, Tom, of having some close people that we're close to that we can reach out when we've experienced secondary trauma and just say, man, this happened and I need to talk with somebody about it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So we got to take one more break. When we come back, we are going to continue our conversation with Tom, and we look forward to seeing you right after the break.
For the latest in Houston traffic, weather, news, and information, don't miss The Evening Surge on tncradio.live.
At Hot Shot Secret, we share the science behind common diesel problems. For example, stiction. Found throughout the oil system, stiction is the sticky friction that negatively impacts your engine's ability to function at an optimal level. The molecular structure of oil is a hydrocarbon. The engine's extreme heat, tight tolerances, and high pressure cause the oil to break down and release hydrogen, leaving behind varnish, a carbon-based deposit. The varnish clings to the engine's moving parts, creating drag on the turbocharger, oil pump, and pistons. Symptoms of stiction include a rough idle and the loss of fuel economy and performance. Hot Shot Secret Stiction Eliminator delivers a 98% clean rating in third-party scrub tests. Its synthetic cleaner plus nano lubricant contains no harmful solvents and is formulated to be left in the engine to safely dissolve stiction for thousands of miles. It works as you drive.
Stiction Eliminator is available at truck stops, Tractor Supply, O'Reilly's Auto Parts, and online at HotShotSecret.com. Hot Shot Secret, powered by science.
Ready for the power of positive and something that will put you back to a time you wanted to last forever? Music is the ultimate time machine. What was your favorite time? Do you want to go back there? LTD Radio features the songs of the 70s, 80s, and 90s that will transport you to a happier time. It'll make you smile and brighten your day. We could all use that about now. TNCRadio.live is proud to carry the great music of LTD Radio.
Be sure to catch the Truckers Network radio show with your host, Shelley Johnson, weekdays at 3 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. Eastern, right here on TNCRadio.live.
Welcome back to Truckers Life Radio. I am Derek Thompson, and we are finishing our conversation with Tom Wolfe. And Tom, and you're not the governor of PA, by the way, the Tom Wolfe that's not the governor. But Tom, this has been a great conversation. We've already covered a lot, and I'm really interested now. You know, we've talked about the buildup of stress, how prevalent that is for our audience and for truck drivers in particular, and the issue of secondary trauma and all that's going on in the world right now that where we're just taking on trauma and oftentimes not even realizing it. I wonder for you, Tom, if you, again, going back to your past history as a professional truck driver for 21 years, experiencing a lot of these things for yourself, how did your Christian faith make a difference in your life through some of the things we've been talking about?
Wow, I can't imagine life on the road without a faith. You know, when we have something larger than ourselves, something transcendent in our lives, it gives us some place to take all of these things we've been talking about, all of this energy, all of the despair of the world that's handed to us, all of this trauma. And, you know, at the end of the day, I just choose not to put it all in me. But at the end of the day, I also know that there's a God and this world's not spinning out of his control, even though it would seem to be.
Yeah.
But I know that he makes himself available to us through prayer and through just silence, just, you know, at the end of the day, sitting in that bunk in the dark, just reaching out to God in prayer. And you know, even if you're not hugely religious, prayer makes a difference. Give it a try. God, if you're out there, I need your help. I had the most horrendous day that I could have ever imagined. And I need your help. I need you to help me have some peace and some quiet, still my soul. And those were the things. Journaling was huge. I remember, you know, major events happening. I was on the road when we started the invasion to Iraq after 9/11. And it was just, I was terrified. I'm like, God, I don't want to be this far away from my family during this time. Like, we didn't know what was going to happen, right?
Yeah.
Saddam Hussein said the blood would run knee deep in America or whatever. We didn't know what he had or he didn't have. All I did know is if he has anything, I want to be home with my family when it happens.
Right.
And
Yes.
I remember journaling all that. And what journaling does is it creates a spiritual legacy for you. And I look back, I just read through that journal. I just opened it and it was right at that place. And then I read on and I saw how that all resolved. And when you do that over many years, you have a legacy of the goodness of God in your life. And you know that your prayers aren't empty. You know that there's somebody on the other end. You know that he'll work it out in his best timing, in his best way. That was the lifeblood of being on the road and working through situations where something would happen with one of my kids. I'm like, God, I just need to be home. My poor wife is at home with 4 children. And I'm telling you, the hero of my story is my wife.
Yeah.
There was no way my story was going to happen without everything that she did to carry through, you know, the 5 days a week or 4 days, whatever it would be.
Yep.
So the faith part for me, having those quiet times to just sit before God in the darkness of that little bunk on the back of that truck, it was huge for me.
Yeah. Yeah. That, you know, I'm wondering if in that, a part of that was, did you also have a Christian mentor or someone who you were able to have community with
Yes, but only when I was home. I really didn't have that kind of access out on the road because we didn't have cell phones.
That's right. Yeah.
Now, you can pick your phone up and dial any number of friends, maybe, hopefully, because that's the other challenge. And I know that the trucking industry has many, many women in it now. But speaking just for men, I've never met a guy. Well, I don't want to say never, because maybe I did once or twice, but as a general rule, I don't meet any men who have close friends.
Yeah.
They have acquaintances, they have buddies that they have
right.
to, go fishing or hunting or talk sports. But guys that know their deepest, darkest secrets, nope, no.
Yep.
And without that, it's tough. But when you have that guy in your life, you can call that guy and you know that he's going to be there for you and you can process whatever you need to. But without that, you're out there alone. And again, developing a relationship with God is number one, but sometimes you need somebody with skin on to talk to and to listen to you. And we've got to have those people. Hard to cultivate that friendship when you're not home.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the ways then you found that was through the radio, and as you said, kind of Christian radio in particular. How important was that for you?
It was a lifeline. I mean, absolutely a lifeline. And unfortunately, that was before there was, you couldn't get internet radio, so you couldn't listen to whatever you wanted to. And contemporary Christian music radio stations were almost non-existent. Sometimes near a big city, you would have something, but it was contemporary Christian radio was in its infancy back then. That was a time when you could know every artist that was out there. So it was mostly talk radio on the Christian stations, but still listening to the word all day, listening to people expound on the word was very, very helpful for me at that point.
Yeah. It's amazing that there's what I read into that or hear from that is that God meets us where we are. And there's always an avenue. We're never fully alone, right? And we're never fully isolated. There are ways that God is reaching out to us, and whether that's through a radio program or, as you said, when you'd go back home, you had people to connect with. There are ways, and just being aware of that, and then making the most of that, I think is really, really important.
Music is huge for so many people, and most of the time I had my guitar with me, so I could sit back there, and my wife and I were leading worship at times in our church on the weekends, and so to sit back there and kind of worship quietly with the guitar was always a treat, to be completely uninterrupted. And I knew a lot of other guys that did that. It's amazing the diversity of men and women that are on the highways. Some guys are out there driving these trucks that listen to classical music all day. I had a friend that was driving, and he had his French horn with him all the time. He would play in the bunk. I don't know what it was like for the guy next to him to walk by and hear this French horn being played, but that was his time with God and his way of unloading stress and so on from the end of the day. So the music thing is really big for a lot of people, whether they actually play instruments or not, but all that's available on the internet. You can listen to your favorite music all day, every day.
Yeah. Well, Tom, we are wrapping up here, and our time is getting pretty short. Are there any last words that you would want to share to our audience? Any words of encouragement or final thoughts that you have?
Well, it's a community, and I think we have to be intentional about that. And guys always were, especially back in the day when there weren't cell phones and there was more interaction. Guys would talk and share stories and all. But, if you are a believer, please pray for the men and women that are out there on the road. It's not an easy job, as you know, and there's a severe shortage of drivers in this country. And maybe you've never even been in a truck. Maybe you're just listening to this station and it just came on. And you've never really given the trucks around you much thought until you're stuck behind one on a hill.
Yeah.
But pray for those men and women that are out there. It's not an easy job. And, most days are about, 8 to 10 hours of boredom mixed in with 2 or 3 minutes of terror. And, that's your day.
Yeah.
Every day almost. So pray for each other, make the connections. There are online communities I know now, and you guys are part of helping drivers process certain things through online communities. Avail yourself of them. Is it the perfect answer? No, but it's the best answer we have right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for those closing thoughts, Tom. And yeah, we're really big on wanting to create community. And this radio program, we hope, is kind of like a part of your community as a driver and a listener. And we do want to connect with you. And if you are struggling with stress in your life, if you understand you've got some secondary trauma, please reach out to us at truckerslife@tncradio.live. We have other resources we can connect you with. We're also just really interested in hearing from you. If you've got stories you want to share, please reach out to us, truckerslife@tncradio.live. You can also go to tfcglobal.org and learn about the ministry to truck drivers through TFC. But Tom, thank you so much for being with us. This was a great conversation, and we definitely look forward to having you back on in the future.
Thanks very much for having me. Have a great day.
Yep. Have a great night.
I hope you enjoyed the show. Let us hear from you. Send email to truckerslife@tncradio.live. Stay tuned.